Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how cronyism is expanding in the West at pretty much the same rate as the globalization elite are taking control. So the more the globalist elite take control of the Western economies, the greater and faster and more far-reaching is the cronyism that we're seeing. And there's not a whole lot of difference now between the corrupt, piss poor banana republics of the third world and the behaviour of their elites and the behaviour of the Western elites. Now there used to be a lot of difference. I've done a lot of business travelling, and the cronyism, the putting relatives, friends, mistresses, multiple mistresses in the case of a wealthy, influential dude, are given prestigious, well-paid jobs with servants to run around at their beck and call, this sort of thing. And I used to look at that with some amusement. I didn't say anything. It wasn't my place to make cutting observations or to tell them how to do their business. But I used to look at it again with some private amusement. But these things, they happened in the West, but it wasn't widespread. And it usually wasn't in areas that would be particularly harmful or necessarily overly relevant to our standard of living here in the West, or the efficiency with which services were delivered or goods produced. So it was, to some extent, fairly harmless what did go on in the West. It was a burden of sorts, but by a very, very small elite, and it didn't happen very often and wasn't really at great cost to the rest of us. So it sort of didn't matter, but it was quite rare in the overall scheme of things. Most of the time, the people who were hired and given appointed to well-paid, prestigious or critical important jobs, not all the time, but most of the time, they were either well qualified or at worst ordinary, and that was how it was. That wasn't how it was in the third world. Again, some of the places I visited, the corruption was comical. It was that bad, and you still see it in countries around the third world today. And let's take Sri Lanka as an example. They and other places in the region. I'm not singling them out necessarily. I'm mentioning them only because they've had a pretty tumultuous time recently. As most of you probably know, they got suckered by the World Bank and various globalist goons to go completely green and organic and all this sort of stuff, and their economy ended up being destroyed. The economy shrank by 30-40%, and people there are doing it pretty tough. So, but if we look at the Sri Lankan government, they have effectively a ruling family there, and all the key positions, including the president and the key public service bodies, and all the key prestigious jobs there, and some of them exceptionally well paid for a piss poor country like Sri Lanka. Like the average wage there's something like $2,800 a year, and the elites are paying themselves millions of dollars a year. That's how corrupt it is, and they've got no compunction in screwing over their fellow citizens, as the globalists have no compunction, or the flunkies they control in the West have no compunction about screwing over Western fellow citizens. Something that never used to happen, or didn't happen, certainly to anywhere near that scale. But the corruption, the ruling family there at Sri Lanka just ran the place into the ground. They were prepared to accept all the gifts and the bribes and handouts and all the bits and pieces from the World Bank and these guys who should have known the path they were putting Sri Lanka down. The guys at the top, they're not very sophisticated, they're corrupt, and in Sri Lankan terms, they're well-connected elites, but in international sophistication terms, they're they're nothing much, and that's something that used to intrigue me as I travelled the world, talking to some of the elites in some of these third world countries. All they think about is lining their own pockets, and their sophistication is just adequate enough for that, and to fight the internal sleazy, power political battles and that sort of stuff. So the ruling family, all their family had prestigious positions given in one form or another, and the mistresses of the leading guys, they all had fancy jobs and nice houses and nice cars and drivers and that sort of thing. So they were feeding ravenously off the public purse in Sri Lanka, and not only were they pursuing policies that they were bribed into pursuing, but they were lining their own pockets voraciously. And what do you think's going to happen when that sort of behaviour is there? And given that they weren't even competent anyway, it's different when someone's really good at their job and really competent, and they line their own pockets. Then you can go, there's a certain sort of, if they're doing that good a job, maybe they deserve a bit extra. I don't like the corruption side of it and think that shouldn't happen, but it's not so destructive to the people around them or the country or the business or the organisation if someone's very good at their job. But if they're fucking useless, which political appointees, cronyism, patronage, nepotism, and all its subsets, incompetent people are appointed, but richly rewarded. In fact, they reward themselves more richly than a competent person would. So, and they're fucking useless to boot. But that in Australia, as an example, cronyism used to happen here, and as it did all across the West. But there was always that thing where if we're going to do it, if we're going to appoint a buddy or a relative, can we at least try and make sure that they're competent or not put them in positions where they can do too much damage? But that's all gone now. The globalist elite, are hell bent on creating as much damage as they can. Not only social division, but monopolies and oligopolies and cartels that just absolutely destroy and undermine the wealth creation of all across the West, United States, Australia, everywhere. And what got me onto this was just recently a very influential politician. He's actually just retired. He still does things like talk. He goes on speaking tours, that sort of thing. So he's still doing that. But he's got 3 children, and one of them's a young woman. I suppose she'd be about 30 now. And she's just been a professional uni student. She's done nothing. She's done nothing, produced nothing, created nothing, achieved nothing. Is quite sort of, I met her briefly, charming and pleasant in her own way, I suppose, but I've only got a very short window of exposure there to comment on. But I didn't know what happened to her, and I was just looking over some media stories, and she's been appointed a few months ago CEO of a government quango. Now, this is someone who's never had a fucking job, by the way. And she's, it doesn't pay huge money. It pays about 270,000 a year, something like that. But that's a lot more than the average wage, and way more than she could get selling her zero skills out in the marketplace. So this is pure cronyism. And all for the benefit of her father or the family. So she gets given this CEO's job without. Now, as it turns out, I did some more research, and this job was actually advertised. So you've got to assume that there would have been plenty of qualified candidates for it. One imagines quite a few, actually, given that it comes with a lot of perks. But somehow all these qualified candidates were ignored. If any were even interviewed, and it's then appointed to this, as I say, this professional uni student who has never had a job in her life. So she gets the CEO's job. Now it pays us, say, about 270 or so thousand, but it comes with a lot of first-class travel. In fact, that's part of the job description, actually, to do some of this travel. So just looking at the sort of travel that is required and extrapolating from that, she's not going to be traveling coach class or staying in trailer parks or something like that. So we're talking 5-6 star accommodation, and it also takes in some cruising, by the way, 6-star cruising. So the travel and hotel and meals component would come to slightly more actually than the salary. So we're talking all packaged up with all the other bits and pieces, about $600,000 a year. And I'm sure there'll be expense accounts, and then people will be looking the other way on that. So, but let's, for the sake of it, just say $600,000 a year as a total package. Now, this is not traveling on hard business where it's an arduous thing where you're running from here to there and everywhere, and you're doing it on tight budgets or anything. This is luxurious accommodation, food and travel. She'll be dining in embassies and going to embassy parties and sort of things. So it'll be a complete buzz for a single young woman like her, and she'll be talking to Arabian crown princes and all sorts of shit. So this is a fancy gig for anybody, and they've given it, as I say, to someone who's achieved and produced and created nothing in their life, in fact, never had a job. So I then went and looked at the other children of this same former politician, and they also have been appointed to government jobs of various sorts, or where the organisation is 100% dependent on government orders. It's one or the other there. So just having a look at that the eldest son has achieved things in his own right. So that's not as much on the nose as the younger son and the younger girl, the younger daughter. So you can probably give him a pass, actually. But the other two. Now, just on that, I went to look went through other offspring of politicians, influential politicians, and looked, and it's pretty much the same story all over the place. None of these people have jobs that they could achieve on any sort of merit. They've all been gifted jobs and gifted all sorts of things that they just couldn't get on their own. So this is the extent of it. Now, if you look at the amount of also things like mistresses, getting appointed to great jobs, or given other things, like one of the mistresses, one of the politicians, she was given a very lucrative book deal where she was paid $1 million in advance, even though she's never really written anything in her life. Again, never had a real job. But because of her position as a mistress, she's being richly rewarded. And the cronyism also goes through things like when influential politician wants to divorce their wife, for example, and take up with a woman 20, 30 years younger. Their heaven and earth is moved to look after them, so that the ex-wife is given a free house, and then given a taxpayer-funded, very well-paid job, which requires that she never needs to attend any office or do anything. So ex-wives are routinely being paid $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year in these do-nothing jobs, but the taxpayer is paying that. What the senior politician can do is just pass this cost on the taxpayer that the ordinary citizen would have to pay. Now, would this politician decide to leave their wife for a much younger woman if they had to meet all the costs and suffer the financial ruination that would come with it? I don't think so somehow. But they're able to do that. So, well, I want to leave her and take up with. So yeah, he's one guy. He's 54. And he's taken up with a 28-year-old woman. What she sees in him must be the money, I suppose, because he's not like he's a Greek god or something. He's quite overweight and it appears rather unpleasant from what I've seen. But she's just this dim-witted bimbo, and so she's given an $800,000 a year job that he's the young girl he's taking up with. And the ex-wife is given a $400,000 a year job, plus of course, the house that's all paid up, nice car, fully furnished, and then he gets these very lucrative real estate investment deals just suddenly land in his lap on top of other sort of gigs and perks that he gets. And so within a year or two, he's made up all the money that was lost in the divorce, plus some, plus some. And it's all very smooth because taxpayer money is being sprayed in all directions to make it easy for him. But the ordinary citizen can't do that. And the politician of yesteryear couldn't do that. And there are politicians from years ago, I mean, talking the sort of the early to mid 80s now, the guys that I knew, and they were talking about how tough it was following divorce, having to pay alimony and child support and this, that, the next thing, and how they were struggling to get back on their feet financially. So there's a big disincentive to behave like that if you're going to be financially ruined. So in this case, in these cases, multiple cases now, there's so many cases but the problem I've got is all this is being passed on, the cost of it, the cost of what is in effect an indulgence, for a 52-year-old, 54-year-old man to go off with a 28-year-old woman, that's an indulgence. And the 28-year-old woman is given an $800,000 a year job when she'd be lucky to make she'd be flat out making $50,000 a year in the real world. And the ex-wife, who's never had a job or hasn't worked in 30 years, is given a $400,000 or $500,000 a year job. But all of this is at the taxpayer's expense. This is the extent of this corruption and wider cronyism that I'm talking about. And it's now rampant in the globalist set. And it's perceived as how things are done. And we're in charge now. We're the elite. We're the globalists. We can take the fruits whenever we want them, at whatever quantity we want, and the damn fucking peasants can put up with it. And if that's the globalist attitude, and it is, by the way, then we're all going to be ruined. Yeah, there may be a tiny elite that have got, is going to take whatever's left, but they're already grabbing what they can, the globalist elite, grabbing what they can in a manner that would suggest that they think it's all going to disappear pretty soon. So they want to get the last crumbs of the disappearing cake before it's gone completely. You look at some of the people that say hang around Boris Johnson and the British Parliament, the mistresses and all the hangers-on and the apparatchiks that are given these cozy jobs and cozy government contracts. This is sort of cronyism. This is the banana republic behaviour that I used to see all across the third world as I was travelling around, but didn't see that much in the West. There were standards of probity, standards of fiduciary responsibility, things like that. They're all disappearing now, along with the rule of law, the enforcement of contracts through the courts. All these things are disappearing, and the West increasingly is resembling the banana republic behaviour that I used to see all the time travelling around the third world. It's now here in the West, all across the West. In my view, I mean, look at the behaviour of the Biden family, for example, and the media isn't even trying to hold them to account. They're just running riot, and also the view of the globalist elite is well, we're entitled to do it. Fuck off, peasant, and shut the fuck up. And there's nothing you can do about it anyway, so just shut the flying fuck up. And if you complain anything more about it, we'll call you Hitler, and that'll shut you up. That'll show you. So I think that's how it is, and I think we need to really accept or realise that this is how it is, and this is what they're doing. This is what the globalist elite is doing to our country, to our wealth, and to our future. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.